let's go ahead and jump in. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedules. I know how precious your time is as a GP, as an allocator, as an investor, as someone who's building an enduring firm. So we're grateful and we're honored that you would take some time to be here with us. We're going to jump right in onto our agenda and just give you a quick overview of how we're going to spend this time. Note that we're going to save plenty of time for Q&A. If at any point in our presentation you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. Eric and I will monitor it. We can, take the question live if it fits, or we can kind of tag it and come back to it at the end of our kind of presentation when we can dig in and make this a little bit more of discussion and conversation. So we'll save plenty of time for Q&A. The way that we're going to spend our time, we're going to start off with just a quick framing that for managers and GPs that are thinking about their growth of their investing practice beyond their first fund. And then we're going to jump straight into some practical application. We want this to be both, really targeted for a group of people that are in the middle of deploying their first fund and are starting to think about the future. And then what are those things that we need to, the basics that we need to build out such that we're ready to launch a 18 to 24 month fundraising plan to put us right on schedule to execute a first close and then to welcome in the first company of our fund two. We'll get into some practical applications, some practical tools, and we'll be sure to keep our eye on the clock. We know that in our work with clients, it's a lot of what we focus on is kind of giving first and then building around a clear set of deliverables. And this session is built on that one deliverable of how do we get to that first close of our second fund. And so we're going to take a similar approach to our work together today. So with that, why are we here? Next slide, please. First, we're here because of Taylor. Taylor, huge thanks to you. Thanks for everything that you have done to build out your community, all the resources and educational services that you've provided. I know it's been a big benefit to me. It's been a big benefit to the portfolio companies that I've been around and to a lot of our clients have used your models as well. So I want to say thanks to you for helping us get this session in the hands of people where it can be really valuable. So thank you very much. If you haven't, really encourage you to check out Taylor's work. If you came to this session from kind of the Graph Advisors Substack or posts, welcome. Glad to have you here. Definitely check out what Taylor's doing, foresight.is. So Taylor, thanks so much for helping us broadcast and amplify this opportunity. A little bit about Graph Advisors. So we are here because we love working with allocators. Across our experience in investing, in raising capital in the private markets, in the nonprofit markets, we have really come to learn what does it take to put wins on the board. And this is one of the things that we have most enjoyed in our time with clients over the past couple of years is being very, very focused on what's a win that is going to advance the work and the vision that our clients and that each of you have. When we think about this as that win in the context of being a fund manager normally takes place when money moves hands. When you get a capital commitment from an LP into your fund, that's a huge win. When you invest from your fund into a portfolio company, that's a big win. When there's a liquidity event that then creates a distribution waterfall and you receive a return from a portfolio company, and then you move that money to your LPs, compounded capital, even more massive of a win. And so what we've seen over time is that to put those wins on the board, to make that money move, we have to get the paper lined up. To line up paper, we also have to align people. And so that's what our approach is, to focus on getting the wins, moving capital, moving paper, and ultimately about moving and aligning people. That flywheel requires coordination and leadership, but once it gets going, it can be really, really powerful. So that's where we're coming in today. We're really focused on this session of what are the steps that are needed so that we can put a big win on the board for you all as you're thinking about your fund two. And that big win, to be really clear, is LP capital arrives in your fund two bank account and you're ready to make your first wire to a portfolio company that will be the first company in your fund two. So that's where we are with this session. And that's the kind of orientation that Eric and I come in with. So that jumps us into kind of the, keeps us going with the big idea of this session. what our focus on is making the jump from fund one to leading a firm. This is a big jump. It's going to take you some time, but everything you've been doing to date as a fund manager, as a GP, as an investor is preparing you for that foundation of firm leadership, building something that's going to last not only one fund, two funds, three funds, grow your team, build a legacy, and build a firm that is going to have a long-term, durable future. We're going to focus on those planning pieces. And we know that a lot of these steps that we get into, are gonna seem really familiar to you. Like, oh yeah, of course, some relationship work. I need a CRM, or oh yeah, I need to have a monthly plan. I need to have some KPIs. What we've seen is that for someone who's currently allocating from their first fund, number one priority is sourcing great deals, winning allocation in portfolio companies that are going to change the world, working with your LPs so that your LPs feel satisfied, engaged, and inspired by your vision for your fund and the performance of your portfolio. And everything else can be a distraction. Even starting with a blank page of, okay, I want to execute the close of my second fund in 18 months. What are the things I need to do? You're going to probably be able to figure all of that out. Y'all are capable folks, but our idea here is to help you go faster at the beginning by reducing the cognitive load of needing, like, what are the steps? What are the things I need to do? We're going to walk through all of that over the next couple of minutes and then open it up for some Q&A. So just to be really clear, is this the right session for you? Next slide. We got, yeah, is now the time. And this is how you're going to kind of know that now is the time to be focused on your move from fund one to fund two. You look at your current performance of your portfolio, and you're climbing that J curve. You can kind of see, here are the companies in my portfolio that are going to be fund returners. They're winners. They've already had markups. The price shares have increased. These are companies that are in demand from other investors. My pipeline is full. My current portfolio of founders is recommending and referring me to their friends and other founders that are just getting started in their journey. And if I match up what my opportunities are with my available capital, I put that on a calendar. I'm going to run out of capital soon. Also, you're going to get feedback from the marketplace of LPs. LPs that are in your fund now are going to be like, hey, what's next? When you mentioned a successor fund in your LPA, when are you going to start thinking about that? I have some friends that I would like to be able to recommend to you. Prospective LPs that were on your kind of, dance card during fundraise for fund one, they've been paying attention to your quarterly updates. They know that you've got some real momentum and they want to join in on the next one. And they're saying, hey, when can we make that first investment? And then finally, ultimately, it's so clear to you that you just freaking love investing and growing as a GP, that this is what you were put on the earth to do, is to invest in companies, and everything you thought it would be before you launched fund one, it has been that and so much more, and you can't imagine doing anything else. So if this describes you, you're in the right place for the next 30, 45 minutes or so. You're in the right place, and we're so honored and grateful that you were with us. If this isn't you, no harm, no foul. Feel free. Jump out of the session and go use your time in a way that's going to be that much more beneficial for your current priorities. But just be really clear. We're coming into this session with a baseline understanding that people here they've done it once and they're ready to do it again. And they really want to rebuild some of that muscle for the fundraise process, for the firm building work that's before them. So again, welcome. That's our framing. We're so grateful that you all are here. Feel free to drop some questions in the chat and we will take those real time, or we'll hold them for a Q&A at the back end of our time together today. I think I'm going to turn it over to Eric to kind of dig in on some of these practical work that we've done with our clients and that you're going to be focused on over the next couple of months. Eric?
Thanks, Nate. Hey, everyone. I'm Eric Friedman, one of the co-founders of Graph Advisors. Thanks again for being here. Thanks, Nate, for getting us to this point. As he mentioned, feel free to put questions in the chat. Feel free to build discussion items. We'll dig into those and answer them at the end. This is obviously all about getting to your first close. For many of you, this is not your first rodeo, but it is a different rodeo. And so this is going to be about what got you here. And so I want to walk through what it looks like to bring Fund 2 to life. There's 4 things we think are critical to doing so. Ultimately, we can help you build a faster boat, but you've got to bring the wind. You've got to bring the energy. We think those things are made up of relationships, getting obviously your pitch ready, reassembling the team, that's full time, service providers, and then building the machine to execute. Your life might be feeling like this right now. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It might be a little bit of a loop. You might not know the way to go. It's hard to measure progress and to understand what is needed. And that means you need a roadmap. And that roadmap presents the key waypoints of what is needed. So these are a practical application of what I described before. The relationships, the pitch, the team, internal and external, the execution plan, and then turning all that into action, and most importantly, keeping you accountable. So you don't want to get bogged down. We want to give you a high-level overview of the plan and then go deeper into Q&A and discussion on some of these points. And we'll start with relationships. So much like the advice I give CEOs, and many of you probably do too, it's always a good idea to start networking with VCs earlier than they think. The same is true for GPs. It's time to start networking with LPs yesterday. I always think about that expression, best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, and the next best time is today. And my favorite thing, you don't get what you don't ask for. If they're a no, they were a no yesterday. This is about the relationships you have, measuring the importance of those, and then of course the tools that you can use. I'll go into that in a little bit, but this is about reaching back into the work done over the past 2 years, over the past 4 years, in your inbox, in your existing CRM, or the relationships and meetings you've had. And that brings us to the pitch. I heard recently on a podcast with Roelof Botha, the former head of all of Sequoia, it's good to tell your story in 10 minutes. It's great to tell your story in 5 minutes. And it's excellent to share your story in 3 words. And it resonated with me because it's so hard to boil down your story into a tight, concise thesis. And for me, I like to think about how that pitch gets delivered to a partner and ultimately reaches the IC, because you're up against a bunch of other theses, a bunch of other stories, a bunch of other narratives. And the components of this are here, but they're worth repeating. So it's about the data room, right? And what's inside. To us, that's preparing a deck, a memo, an articulation of your fund, a deep dive into the plan for Fund 2, your returns, your deal memos. How did you make the decision to invest in Company 2 18 months ago? Obviously, your new LPA. Most people want to see Fund 1 performance. I don't know of a single LP that doesn't. Also, it's time to start collecting references. People love real world examples over a story. References from founders, references from LPs. And last but not least, a Fund 2 model. What does the OpEx look like? What is your reserves forecast? And what does that investment pacing look like? I don't think this is about accuracy of prediction. This is accuracy of modeling. Have you put pen to paper on what it might look like? And just like startup revenue projections are either wildly wrong, things go a different direction, or you're wildly wrong because things are up and to the right. This brings us to the team. So another favorite of mine, you can't change what you don't measure. You probably need to evaluate the performance of the existing team. That's worth looking at the full-time team members, what you need in the future, and your service providers. Toby, the CEO of Spotify, says something like, if we're doubling this year, then performance needs to be 2x as good. And I love that as it's applied to a Fund 2, because I think about it much the same way. Questions to ask here. This is a great tactical takeaway from this session. Did the service providers that you have do an objectively great job? What are your new expectations? In any case, it's time to explore, negotiate, renegotiate, contract with new folks, and of course, manage your team. Is the team that got you here the team to get you there? Same is true for startups. The people that are great for 0 to 1 might not be good for 1 to 2. The final stop on your journey is the execution plan. We call it building the machine. This really aligns to your North Star. You want it to be well ordered and running strong. And so what does that look like? It starts with an 18 to 24 month plan. Are you running out of capital to invest when you want to invest in through the next fund? What are those key target dates, right? The number of LP conversations you need to have. When is the second first close? Networking and portfolio triage, obviously that's a huge lift for many. And really, what's the plan? So what is going on this quarter? What are your yearly obligations? And how do you fulfill your fiduciary duty while thinking about Fund 2? So now you have a roadmap. Like anything else, this is the time to say what you're going to do and do what you say. Would love to take a moment to prompt the audience to dive deeper into questions in the chat. Maybe DM us if you're not, if you're a little shy to put it in the open chat. And then also think about questions that others may have. If you have it, somebody else probably does too. We offer a bunch of free resources and tools at graphadvisors.com. And maybe as we turn over to questions and discussions, would love to invite everybody to check out what we do. And again, it's about building a faster boat, executing on that roadmap, but you need to be the energy that pushes it forward. With that, I'll look to the chat, see if there's anything up there. We'll leave this up for Q&A. And
yeah, thanks, Eric, for walking us
take a
through
look at what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think what, our focus here is trying to give you a little taste of what are some of the components of moving from Fund 1 to Fund 2, a framework. Ultimately, that North Star is a first close LP capital in a bank account, a wire to a portfolio company. And then to get there, it starts with relationships. And that relationship is grounded in trust that comes from time, and it comes from consistency. Are you consistently stewarding relationships through your internal processes to build trust, to earn the right to deploy someone else's capital to help build companies? And so that's what firms do. They're all set up on that cycle. Trust management, trust building, and then with the right, earning the right to manage someone's money, then return it and start all over again. So we got a couple of good questions coming in. Thanks so much for folks who've dropped them. Here's a good one. Eric, maybe you can kind of think it through. What's the biggest thing managers get wrong in planning for Fund 2?
Yeah, I would say this is simply narrative and thesis drift. So if you put up what you were going to do in the plan 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when you first had that meeting, how did you stick to that plan? Maybe they haven't looked at things in quite a while, and I think it's drift. There's some wiggle room there, like everybody has an outlier company, right? This is the classic. We don't invest in hardware deals except for that one. But how off the mark are you? And this is especially true for larger allocators. So think endowments, think retirement associations, think institutions that said, hey, this is great. You think you're doing the right thing. You're moving them down the CRM. And then you get the famous, we're excited to keep in touch. Reach out for Fund 2. That's a moment where they look at their notes, look at their CRM, look at their bullets and say, did you do what you said you were going to do? I think that's where people get tripped up.
Yeah, I think, I would be really similar to that. I think folks, it's largely about missing an opportunity to tell the story to your current LPs and your current founders, like with where you're going. So like you want to be able to send a strong signal to future Fund 2 investors that your Fund 1 LPs are by and large coming with you because of the trust and the strength of the relationship that you've built with them, the credibility that you have, the insights that they have into how you make decisions, how you've made some mistakes and how you handled those mistakes, and how you're bouncing back. So you think of really like the love and care for your first customers, your first LPs, needs to be off the charts, because that's then what powers you into going and adding the next wave of LPs that are going to take you from a $25 or $75 million fund to a $149.9 million fund, Fund 2. And so that would be a big one, is like thinking about Fund 2 as distinctly different from, Fund 1. So your firm, like you started telling a story about Fund 1 and telling a story about Fund 2, you're starting to tell the story of a firm. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is what you can expect from us. And here's how we have lived up to those commitments over the past 3 years, as evidenced in our data room, as evidenced in our materials, and as evidenced in the conversations and the feedback that you're going to get when you back channel me with my LPs, or when you take a straight up introduction from me to some of my founders. So that'd probably be the one of the big things.
Maybe we'll rapid fire through a bunch of the rest.
Yeah, good one about portfolio performance.
Yeah, I would just say a few things here. This is, do what you said you would do. I think there's a lot of LPs that want to pulse on a sector. Maybe they've made 3 or 4 bets in those categories. What information have you provided them, and what insights have you found? Do you have a market map, and did you see the deals that are quote unquote headed in the right direction? Did you keep your pacing? Are you meeting your reserves forecast? Like, this is the kind of stuff that I think about. Market conditions, if you're actually deploying on a 10-year window, quarter by quarter, shouldn't really be affected. When others are pencils down due to a macroeconomic or equity market change, it shouldn't make a difference for what your pattern looks like. I don't know if you have anything there, Nate. I was going to go back up and answer another one.
Yeah, let's take another one.
Maybe I will. How do you all work with investor portals? We're agnostic. We work with all investor portals. Where you need to be with service providers, fund admin, legal, audit, investor portals will be there. Some cases it's custom. We've got some unique cases that we've solved. And in many cases, it's software that you've paid for, and that there's comfort on the investor side. Hope, Tim, that answers your question.
Yeah, I think the other thing on investor portals is it's important to understand, as you grow from Fund 1 to Fund 2, you might be engaging with more institutional LPs. And institutional LPs, they're an institution for a reason. They have multiple layers of process that you need to be able to navigate in order to get the answer that you want. And so you have to kind of think through, when I'm building out my investor portal, I'm serving a process. But that process itself, I need to know, is that process going to be sufficient to service the actual decision maker? Who makes the decision to invest in my fund with a $5 million check? And how is that decision maker going to engage with the most important material, the most important parts of my story? So don't let the investor portal kind of like, don't put too much hope in it. Like, you need to have everything in there. It needs to be airtight, but you need to be airtight from the perspective of an analyst or a director at an institution, knowing that they're going to be making a recommendation or they're going to be diligencing, but they don't ultimately have decision-making power. So is what's in your portal actually going to speak to the decision maker? And if that's the only opportunity you have, then you got to put all your eggs in that basket. This is where it comes back to your relationship game. Who is that decision maker, and how can I get to them in addition to their own internally established process? Can I get an introduction from one of my current LPs? Can I get an introduction from another fund manager who I have a good relationship with, so that they're hearing things from their own process that's aligning with what they're hearing and engaging with you directly? That would be my one thought on the investor portal.
Maybe we got a next one here. I'm trying to answer a few in chat too. What are the parameters that matter most when evaluating Fund One performance? Exits, IRR, MOIC, equity ownership, ability to get in competitive deals. Those are all great. I think that's a great list to start with. How important is it to have a vision for Fund Three, Fund Four? This is about LP commitments. And after they've committed to Fund One, having another hard conversation, which is how do you think about following on and enduring with what I'm building as a firm? I think that's a totally fair question that gets skipped after an IOI or a LPA is signed. I think all of these things matter. One of the interesting tidbits is competitive deals may not yield exponential returns. So a competitive deal everybody's fighting for with sharp elbows may or may not be a portfolio, 3x things in the way that at that particular moment, brand names and people's names make it sound like. I don't know if you have anything else there, Nate.
Yeah, I think there's another question that came through just in terms of like when you think about performance, are exits mandatory before marketing Fund Two? I don't think that they're mandatory so long as you have confidence in the performance of your fund and you can demonstrate that performance in a very clear and objective way. The one area where exits might be important for raising Fund Two is if your current LPs are thinking that I will invest in your Fund Two when you've returned some of the capital that I invested in your Fund One. So like, I'm happy to do it, but I'm not going to take money from another pot and move it to your pot. You got to give me some of my money back. And so that might be where it gets a little tricky. But I think this is some of the conversations that you should be having with your most, engaged, most significant LPs in your current fund. Hey, I'm looking at my forecasting. I'm looking at where I'm going to be in 18 to 24 months. I'm starting to think through my next fund. I'm proud of the performance of our current fund. You saw it at our most recent investor gathering. How are you thinking about where we are relative to Fund Two? You want to have a relationship with some of your current LPs where you can have that type of an open and honest conversation. If they believe in your ability to compound their capital, they will be looking to give you more capital to work with, because that's not true for all of the ways in which they're making investment decisions. And so you want to have that relationship. You want to have a real clear understanding of how are they viewing me. If you have exits and you can point like, hey, this is how much we've returned relative to what we invested, that's going to carry a lot of water in a fundraising process. But if you don't have those, it doesn't mean you're sunk or you shouldn't get started. You should definitely get started.
Jump into next in sort of order they came in, which I think is fair. It's from hope I'm saying this right. Rushika here, maybe come off mute and ask this question, but sharing the next level detail on how fund managers work with us and typical fees. We may be different than some others. We're pretty transparent about this. Ultimately, this comes down to value of time and what you want to focus on. We put together a pretty comprehensive set of steps that it takes to manage and run Fund One and Fund Two. I think it's something like 73 different things. And most GPs want to work on deploying capital and working with their portfolio. We tackle the other 70 plus things. And so we've got some pretty clear service offerings. $1,500 a month gets you a bookkeeper. $5,000 a month gets you a fractional CFO. And then we have bespoke operational lifts. This is everything from standing up an accelerator. I've done it twice in an investing capacity. Once with Nate, where we met a few years ago, to custom SPV, high leverage operational scenarios to building, I'd call it high code instead of low code solutions for people. And so we try to make it clear with a menu, but then we're ready to take on bespoke needs of allocators.
Maybe kind of relates to two other questions that are here around kind of benchmarks for evaluating fund admin or other service providers. And then I think a question here around, like building the team, thinking about part-time or fractional support. For a fund one, I think there's a couple of things that are going on. One is the fund may not, it may not be producing the fees that would allow you to really scale up and build out a full-fledged team. And every time you take a fee drawdown, it just means your fund has to perform that much better to return capital to LPs. And so I think a lot of first-time fund managers, rightly so, are very, very tight with their expenses to ensure that they have the most wiggle room possible on kind of fund performance. With fund two, it starts to look a little bit different because you have the performance from fund one. And also you start to scale. You think, oh, wow, I have a whole set of processes for my fund one that are still have another 5.5 to 6 years left that I'm going to have to, cultivate and manage quarter by quarter by quarter. And I have, this new fund, but I'm not going to stop there. I want to do something different. I want to add another one. I want to build out more platform support for my portfolio companies. And so when we think about evaluating service providers, it really comes down to what you have a scarce supply of, which is your time and your energy and your focus. You are employed by your partners to do one thing, which is to generate return on capital. That means you're sourcing deals, you're winning allocation, and you're keeping those LPs happy. That's how you generate alpha. Everything else is in some respects beta. It's a commodity. Fund admin over here, fund admin over there, fractional CFO over here, modeling service over there. And so what you're trying to focus on is how much leverage do I get from those service providers? If I can spend 30 minutes of my time with that service provider this week, how much time does it free up for me to then go back to my investing? So if you're finding like I spend 30 minutes with a service provider and it gives me 5.5 hours of work to do, probably something wrong. If you're spending time chasing one of your service providers to give you the information that you need, probably something wrong. If you're the one who's having to remind your service providers of upcoming deadlines and due dates, probably something wrong with the service provider. And then kind of into this point of, as you grow your firm, you're going to be working with more and more institutional LPs. You might be subject to a heightened sense of scrutiny from the SEC, and regulatory filing requirements might increase as well. And this is where you start to see things like, all right, do I need a CFO? Do I need my own general counsel? Do I need a chief compliance officer? And those are things that I think firms will grow into over time. I think with some of the new SEC regulations, which is a whole rabbit hole we can get into maybe offline if you have those types of questions, I think that we're going to see some fees start to increase just for what's going to be required for audit and everything else. And so that might give you a little bit more room to flex to add those. But these full-time roles, they're going to eat up a lot of your OpEx. And so as you think through your model, what's my cash flow from fund one? What's my cash flow going to be from fund two? How do I want to use that cash relative to what my thesis and my vision is for my fund? And then what percentage of that needs to go to hiring these staff members? Are these staff members just going to be cash compensation? Am I prepared to negotiate for carry considerations? So on and so forth. We found, at least, obviously with the clients we work with, like there's a real opportunity, and we think that this is something we can grow our business around, where folks have a certain set of tasks that need to be done, but they don't necessarily feel like they need to make a full-time hire at 350 grand a year plus carry to accomplish those set of tasks. And so between some of the software that we've used or have built, plus the experience that we get, we think that there's a growing world where funds can stay lean on their OpEx, but still have some heavy firepower when it comes to tackling the things that are non-negotiable. I got to have up-to-date quarterly financial reports. I need someone who's going to make the audit process as frictionless as possible for me as the GP. I need someone who knows their way around compliance to work with our outside counsel. I need someone who is going to be responsive to me on the small things as well as the big things. And that's some of that niche that we're trying to fill at Graph. So a long response to a couple of different questions there, hoping that we tackled it. If there was more that you were hoping to get, please come off mute or jump into the chat. Eric, any other
Quick answer
questions?
to Andrew's question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Andrew's great question. Suggestions on evaluating service providers such as fund admin. I think this speaks directly to the scarcity of time.
Yeah.
You can spend 5 to 10 hours coming up with a pros cons list, taking pitches, organizing your thoughts on relationships, prices, and how they fit into your fund. Or you can leverage an outside service provider that does this often. I'm trying not to be too biased here, but this is one of the things that we do based on having the knowledge of deploying these service providers across multiple funds. There's an intangible here when you take a sales pitch call from an AE, which is how are they really going to perform? And that's amazing to get from another GP. We have a worldview into that. And so there's a trade to be made. Do you want to spend 10 hours doing that, or do you want to spend 10 hours doing something else? I value founder time, GP time, somewhere around the $500 to $1,000 an hour mark. You may view it higher, you may view it lower, but that's how I think about spending time. So thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Eric, a question here in terms of, there's a couple more. One is just in terms of a kind of a venture studio. So,
Sure.
venture studio raised some capital. I know we've spent some time with accelerators. You've been up close on these things. Any thoughts on venture studio storytelling metrics?
Yeah, work directly with three. I think the words venture studio are almost as nebulous as business development. Taylor's laughing, but I think it's true. This means so many different things to different people. We have a new take on the world. We're going to create companies with higher ownership at lower areas in this category with this network of people. It depends on the definition. This is purely about performance and belief in this sector. The performance metrics a lot of times, and I see this when putting on my LP hat, the thing we're doing is awesome, but it's early. We don't know yet, which in some ways is code for it's not working, and in other times it is about timing.
Cool.
Paula asks how to detect and approach potential investors to whom you have
Yeah.
no direct contact with. I think this falls directly into what you would tell a portfolio company CEO. Triangulate connections. Warm intros are best. Cold outreach is about the research you do, not about the story you want to tell that person. A quick anecdote about that is spending 15 minutes organizing your thoughts about what could be helpful to them, the research on their background, and how what they're doing is interesting to get to the point of pitching. I see a lot of times somebody rips through a CRM and has 100 emails out, which is a link to their DocSend, a paragraph about their company, and let me know if you want to chat. Hard to get a cold response from a cold outreach like that.
Yeah, another question here in terms of telling the story from fund 1 to fund 2. How does that story evolve? And I think there's a couple of things here. One is the story is just going to be much richer. It's obviously as you build fund 1, you have your angel portfolio or a phantom portfolio or a prior scout or associate or principal portfolio that you can point to. But for fund 2, for fund 1, the big thing there is that you are fundamentally responsible as the custodian and manager of someone else's capital. And that's huge. That's a big thing. And so I think part of that story, and this may not live necessarily in your pitch deck, but it's going to come through in your conversations and in the relationships I think it's a lot of evaluation on who you are as a leader, who you are as someone that these folks, your LPs, can trust, can see, being proud of, yeah, I'm in that person's fund. And so I think that's a really big way in your storytelling. It's not only here are the numbers from my first fund, but here's what I've learned about myself, about my team, about the marketplace. And here's how I'm now better positioned to capitalize on fund 1 and those lessons learned. And so this goes to, I think, another question, which is how closely should fund 2 thesis align with fund 1's thesis? I think they can vary a little bit, but my sense is that to build that trust. If there is some evolution or there is some move, like you're going to have a very clear rationale of, here's how my thesis has evolved. And that thesis, I think, is going to be narrowing. It was broader and now it's narrowed because of what I've learned from Fund 1 or Fund 2. I think if my thesis was, one thing and now it's feeling like a 180, that's going to be really hard for people to square. Because one of the things that you're being evaluated on is your ability to source great deals. And that comes from a level of embeddedness. Are you, as the GP, embedded in the communities, embedded in the networks, embedded in the geographies where those deals come to life, where those founders spend time, where those companies are created? And a lot of times that embeddedness is going to be an outgrowth and flow from your thesis. And so if your thesis in Fund 2 has changed, I think you have to be prepared for the question of what gives you the right to win behind that thesis if for the past 4 years you've been spending time pursuing a separate thesis. So I think it's fine for your thesis to evolve and change. It should, because of what you're learning. But I would be really hesitant if it looked like my thesis was kind of whack-a-mole. Like, oh, it used to be crypto and now it's AI. And, in 2 years, it might be something different. That's probably not the question behind the question, but just to say it out loud, I think it's important. Any follow-ups on that? Feel free to drop them in. Yeah, we're about the 45-minute mark. Maybe we can get to some key takeaways here. And then we got the time block for an hour. So I'm going to be here till the top of the hour. And welcome to just, turn this into more of a jam session for folks that want. But kind of, I think the key takeaways are, one is getting really clear from your current fund model. Taylor can help you do this if you need to refresh in that model. When are you going to run out of capital? And relative to that, I think is a real self-evaluation. Is this what I love to do? And do I want to grow at this? Or has this just become a job? And now I have a lifestyle or I have commitments that this is what I got to do now. Because I think as you start to tell the story of fund to firm, that's going to be key. Are people seeing that this is something that is going to become your life's work? So that self-reflection part of this is huge. From there, it comes a very clear line in the sand. I will close Fund 2 and be ready to wire my first portfolio investment on October 31st, 2024. Be really fast, but possible. Or by March 31st, 2025, first close is executed. April 1st, first wire to portfolio company goes out. And if you can start to get that level of clarity on this is what I'm here for, and this is my target, everything else can really start to flow. And from there, it's, have I put the time in with my relationships to build trust? Is my current team the right team? Are my current LPs, are they ready to run with me another lap? Who are my most significant influential LPs currently? I want them to be my biggest ambassadors in the fundraise. What do they need to do to feel really clear and to feel really inspired by joining me for the next chapter of my fund? So on and so forth. So those probably the big takeaways. Questions keep coming in here. Eric, anything else we should tackle?
Yeah, I think a tactical takeaway, which comes up a lot, is what software should I use? Hey, what CRM are you using? What are the platforms? I answered this in the chat, but it's worth saying out loud. A lot like photography. What camera should I buy? It's the one you have at that time. And a lot of times we act as an accountability system for people. Just taking an hour to flush the system, the pipeline, the emails, the follow-up, the to-dos. In our minds, it doesn't matter what CRM you use. It matters the output, the throughput, and the measurement. And so everybody gets caught up, or maybe hey, I just set up HubSpot to do 60 things connected to Zapier. And my question is always, how many people have committed? Another tactical takeaway that I think about a lot is that if you are actively raising Fund 2, Fund 3, and beyond, a great audit is to look at your calendar. If you don't have time blocks for LP outreach, follow-ups, and pitches, it could be a signal that this is not important. And I think the calendar kind of rules a lot of people's worlds. And so I look for that, often. It's obviously got to be balanced with managing things. But those are a couple of tactical takeaways that I think about. Maybe some new questions came in. I'll take a look.
Yeah, I think we talked about this one a little bit earlier, just to kind of go back to it. I don't think there's like a benchmark. Like if you haven't hit this, MOIC benchmark, then, you should shut down and go find a new job. Particularly when the majority of your investments have not yet had an exit or been resolved. So I think, you're really, this is where I think the time compression is going to get tough. Like, I think markups on safe, I think they are helpful in telling the story. But I think a really rigorous LP who doesn't know you that well is gonna see those with a big asterisk. Like, what is that? Who are those investors? And the conversion rate from a markup on safe to price share to exit, there's still, that funnel is still towards the top of that funnel. And so folks want to go all the way to like a unicorn outcome. There's a long way to go from a safe markup to a liquidity event that returns capital, multiples on capital. So that'd be one. I think if you're at that point where, like, man, I'm looking at my calendar, I'm looking at my pacing, and come Q2 of 2025, I'm gonna really be running out of capital to deploy. I think that is at that point to really do a hard look at your portfolio. Where are those companies going to be in Q3 and Q4 of 2024? And if they're still going to be early, I think that's where you go to you start to develop your own theory of, why have I earned the right to deploy more capital if from my first fund I still haven't returned capital? If you feel good about that story and you feel good about that theory, go check that. Go check it with some of your LPs. They're going to give you really clear feedback. Go check it with some of your other fund manager friends. Come check it with us. We'll pressure test it. And so I think that's where you are. It's like, there's no barrier there that says, do not enter. If you are still if the majority of your fund has not had liquidity and you're still kind of going on safe markups, but know that it's going to be a little bit of a harder journey, because you're not going to have the wind in your sails from, return capital, and the marks that come with that.
Having fun answering a few questions in the chat and a few questions in DM. As we come to the latter half of the hour, we're on the 52, which gives us 8 minutes left. If anybody does have a deep dive question or discussion, happy to have that now. We'll plan on landing this plane at the top of the hour. Answer some questions here, message some people to maybe cover some of those bases. You will have access to a recording of what we talked about today on graphadvisors.com and on foresight.is. You'll also have access to the deck. Thanks for those questions. Thanks for answering some of my things too. It's good to see some of the plus ones and thumbs up here. Did we not get to any of the questions? Anybody have a burning hand in the air?
Yeah. Hey guys, it's Jared Thomas. I just had one kind of that I thought
thanks.
might be easier to speak to rather than write. You mentioned kind of having 12 to 24 months of capital to start the plan. Clearly the last couple of years have been a little different with COVID, and obviously the market's been pretty crazy the last couple of years. And so we made our last investment in 2020. ran into COVID. We were going to market then. We kind of held off. Then last year was a mess for first time funds marketing. So we held off. Our DPI is like 1.5. So our investors are happy. They're supportive. And I'm just wondering, how important is that we kind of have that momentum into fund 2 raise? I mean, we've done some SPVs between the last fund and now. We've been active. We can kind of show pipeline. But I've heard that before, and I'm just wondering from your perspective, like, is it a deal breaker to be going out to market, not having kind of put anything in a fund for the last couple of years, but with really great performance? Or like, how do you measure and balance those two?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for coming off mute. I think that, I mean, if you can demonstrate that your fund is performing well and that your LPs understood your strategy, supported your strategy, and are happy with how you've executed your strategy and are willing to provide testimony to that effect, I think you're in a pretty good spot. I think there's some, I think that was a huge decision. And so you can expect that LPs that might not have followed you as you were making that decision are going to want to understand the rationale behind it. And so I think there's going to be some work around, how was that decision made? What were the drivers of that decision? What has now changed such that you're ready to like flip the switch back on? And then I think that's like, okay, like we'll walk that forward to me. Like, if how does that then play out in 2 or 3 years if the US has a big recession and there's another kind of VC winter, like how are you going to approach that? So I think it's really going to be a question of your clarity of your strategy and the process that you went through to make that decision. And I think there's you can expect folks to then push you on how would you make, what would be the indicators that you would be looking for in the future that might lead you to kind of, revisit that plan. So there's a lot of funds that I think, it's kind of like the weather, right? Everyone has kind of been walking through the same weather in the marketplace. Other funds have decided like, hey, I'm going for it. You've decided, hey, I'm gonna focus on managing my current portfolio, being hyper selective on the deals that I can invest in. I've done that through SPVs, and I'm going to be assessing the opportunity when it's time for us to go back to market with a full-fledged fund offering to LPs. That moment is now. All right. And so it's like, okay, great. Like, you made a different decision than other managers did, which was just to plow ahead. Why did you think that was the right decision? How do you know it's the right decision now? Evaluating it with the data that you have. And how would you make that decision differently in the future? I think if you've thought through all that and you're prepared to speak to it convincingly, I think that story should work well. Yeah, I think the other thing that you have going for you is like you're not bogged down with a bunch of portfolio investments from 2021 and 2022 that are I think are going to be really challenging for a lot of funds.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Taylor, thank you for setting this up. Really appreciate all the stuff you're doing. Been using a lot of it, and this is really timely, so very helpful.
Anyone want to load us up with one more question? All right, maybe we'll kind of wrap there. Kind of leave you with the Graph Advisors frame. Ultimately, it's about putting a win on the board. The North Star of this session has been getting capital into your Fund 2, getting capital from Fund 2 bank account into a portfolio company. To do that, you got to line the paper up. Before the paper, though, is the importance of relationships and creating internal processes and systems to support the trust that good relationships are built on. We're happy to help you do that at Graph Advisors, www.graphadvisors.com. Taylor has demonstrated his ability to do that, Foresight.is, over a decade plus. We're grateful to you, Taylor, for helping us amplify this opportunity and organizing it. But thanks, everybody. It's been great to spend the time with you all. Thank you very much.